My name is Calantha Young. I am 29 years old. Last Saturday, I parked my car on the crushed stone driveway of the Oceanfront Manor in Newport, Rhode Island. The Atlantic breeze smelled of salt and expensive perfume. A string quartet played a soft melody on the manicured lawn. It was a picture-perfect afternoon for my older sister's wedding. I walked up to the welcome table wearing a tailored navy dress. A young event coordinator stood behind it, smoothing a linen tablecloth. She gave me a warm, professional smile. "Name, please," she asked, holding a silver pen over the leather-bound guest book. "Calantha Young. I am the bride's sister." The coordinator traced her finger down the printed list on her clipboard. She stopped. She dragged her finger back to the top of the page. The warm smile fell from her face. She looked up at me, her eyes darting to the security guard standing near the archway. "I am sorry, Miss Young," she said, keeping her voice low so the arriving guests would not hear. "Your name was removed from the guest list this morning." I stood there. The ocean breeze suddenly felt cold against my skin. Before I could ask her to check the list a second time, the heavy oak doors of the bridal suite swung open. My sister Jessica stepped out. She was 32, draped in custom lace, holding a crystal glass of champagne. Our mother Brenda trailed a step behind her. Brenda spent a moment adjusting the neckline of her mother of the bride gown before looking my way. They did not look surprised to see me stranded at the welcome table. They looked victorious. Jessica took a sip of her champagne and let out a short, breathy laugh. "Why would I invite someone who is not really family?" Jessica asked. Her voice carried over the string music. A few heads turned in our direction. Brenda stepped up beside her favorite daughter and crossed her arms. "Honestly, Calantha, we should have done this years ago," Brenda said. Her tone dripped with rehearsed pity. "Ryan's family is very prominent. Having you here asking people to pass the rolls and talking about your little waitressing shifts, it ruins the aesthetic. It is better for everyone if you just go home." They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to cry, to beg, to make a scene. They wanted to point and show their new wealthy in-laws exactly how unstable the black sheep of the family was. I looked at my sister's smug smile. I looked at my mother's cold eyes. I felt a tight knot form in my chest, but I kept my hands steady by my sides. I nodded once. "Then today is the last time you will ever see me as family," I said. I reached into my purse, pulled out a small wrapped box tied with a silver ribbon, and set it on the welcome table. I turned my back on them and walked away. The gravel crunched under my heels. I did not look back. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally erased me from their curated, picture-perfect lives. What Jessica and Brenda did not know was that my name was not just missing from the guest list. It was the only name printed on the master deed for the entire estate. By the time Jessica finished her glass of champagne, the venue manager would hand her a bill for $85,000, and her perfect groom would be asking a question she could not answer. What happened next at that wedding is something those 200 guests will never forget. Welcome to Grape Vengeance, where hidden truths finally step into the light, and quiet people get the last word. If you have ever been pushed out by the people who were supposed to protect you, this story is for you. Drop a comment telling me your age and where you are listening from, and be sure to subscribe. To understand how a mother and sister could throw their own blood away at the door, and why that single mistake cost them everything they built, I need to take you back 11 years. 11 years ago, I was an 18-year-old girl working weekends at a diner to save up for state college. I checked my bank account balance on a Tuesday morning, expecting to see the $8,000 I'd scraped together over 3 years. The screen showed $14.12. I ran home. I found Brenda in the kitchen unboxing a set of imported ceramic plates. When I asked her about the missing money, she did not flinch. She kept unwrapping the plates. "Your sister needed it for her semester in France," Brenda said, tossing bubble wrap onto the counter. "You are not ambitious like Jessica Calantha. You do not need a degree to wait tables." That was the day the lie began. To justify stealing my future, they had to label me a failure. I packed a single duffel bag that afternoon and moved out. Over the next decade, Brenda and Jessica built an elaborate story for our relatives. In their version of reality, I was a lazy drifter who refused to grow up. They needed me to be a failure, so they could feel like royalty. I let them tell their story. I let them think they broke me. I embraced the invisibility because it kept their toxic hands out of my real life. While they spent years pretending to be rich, I spent years actually building something. I checked my rearview mirror as I turned my car onto the coastal highway. The stone gates of the oceanfront manor shrank into the distance. My phone sat in the cup holder beside me. Exactly 15 minutes after my tires left the gravel driveway, the screen lit up with my sister's name. I did not answer it. I leaned back into the leather seat, turned off the radio, and let the ocean sound fill the quiet space. I knew what was happening back on that manicured lawn without needing to hear her voice. 15 minutes earlier, Jessica stood under the white flower arch near the cliffside terrace. She leaned against the polished wooden railing, holding a crystal glass of champagne in her left hand and a tight arrangement of white roses in her right. Her wedding photographer paced back and forth on the grass, adjusting his camera lens, telling her to tilt her chin toward the sun. Brenda stood nearby, holding the long train of Jessica's lace gown off the lawn so it would not touch the dirt. They were laughing. They were soaking in the admiring glances of 200 guests sitting on gold Chiavari chairs across the property. Then Marcus stepped onto the grass. Marcus was 38 years old, dressed in a tailored gray suit with a silver lapel pin bearing the crest of Sterling Young Estates. As the general manager of the manor, his job was to ensure every high-profile event ran without a single flaw. He did not care about photo angles or lighting. He carried a leather folder under his arm and a digital tablet in his hand. He walked past the photographer, stepping right into the middle of the camera frame. "Excuse me, Mrs. Young," Marcus said, addressing Brenda first. "I need a word with the bridal party inside the management office immediately." Jessica lowered her champagne glass and frowned, letting her smile drop. "We are in the middle of pre-ceremony portraits," Jessica said, her voice sharp and impatient. "Whatever administrative detail you forgot, go talk to my coordinator at the entrance table." Marcus did not blink. He stood his ground on the grass, his face completely unreadable. "Your coordinator is the one who brought this to my attention," Marcus replied. 5 minutes ago, a guest was formally removed from the property under your instructions. The name submitted on the rejection log was Calantha Young. Jessica rolled her eyes and gestured dismissively with her hand, spilling a tiny drop of champagne onto the grass. "Yes," my sister Jessica said. "She was not invited. She showed up anyway, trying to cause a scene and embarrass us. We handled it. Now please get off the lawn so my photographer can finish before the light changes." Marcus opened his leather folder. "That is where the problem lies," Marcus said softly. "The oceanfront manor was reserved under an executive zero-balance courtesy agreement. Under our operating contract, that specific waiver is legally bound to the physical presence and written authorization of the primary client on file, Calantha Young." Jessica froze. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass so hard the crystal rattled against her ring. "What are you talking about?" Jessica demanded. "The venue was paid for months ago. My mother paid for it." Marcus shifted his gaze to Brenda. Brenda moved her weight from one foot to the other, her eyes dropping to the grass for a brief second before she forced her chin back up. "I signed the day of contact paperwork," Brenda insisted, taking a step forward. "I am her mother. My younger daughter is a temp worker who has nothing to do with this contract. You are making a ridiculous mistake." Marcus turned his tablet toward them, showing a digital document with blue highlight bars. "You signed as the secondary contact for delivery logistics," Marcus explained. "You did not sign as the account holder." The moment Calantha Young was turned away at the gate and her name was struck from the ledger. The courtesy waiver was automatically nullified by our corporate billing software. He paused, tapping the glass screen once with his stylus. The total balance for the venue rental, staff labor, floral arrangements, and high-end catering sits at $85,000. Because the primary client was removed without written consent, our standard same-day liability clause takes effect. The $85,000 must be settled in full before the string quartet plays the processional music. Jessica stared at him, the flush of excitement draining entirely from her face. The photographer lowered his camera, sensing the sudden shift in the air. A few guests sitting in the front row looked over, noticing the long silence by the archway. "This is a joke," Jessica whispered, her voice rising an octave. "Calantha put you up to this, didn't she? She called you from the parking lot to throw a tantrum because she did not get a seat." "No one called me Marcus." The software updates automatically when a guest tag is marked rejected by the front desk software. You have 25 minutes before the ceremony is scheduled to start. If payment is not authorized by then, company protocol requires us to lock the estate doors, halt kitchen operations, and ask your guests to clear the lawn. Brenda took a quick step toward Marcus, her face tightening with anger. "Do you have any idea who the groom's family is?" Brenda hissed, keeping her voice low. "Ryan Foster's father sits on the board of 3 major financial institutions in Boston. If you ruin this day over a technical glitch, I will have your job by Monday morning." Marcus did not flinch. He adjusted his cufflinks and looked Brenda dead in the eye. "I answer directly to the Chief Operating Officer of Sterling Young Estates," Marcus said smoothly. "And unless you have $85,000 on a card right now, I suggest we move this conversation out of sight of your guests." Panicked sweat broke out along Jessica's hairline, ruining her carefully sprayed curls. She grabbed her heavy lace skirt in both hands, pulled Brenda by the wrist, and practically ran toward the side entrance of the main house. They ducked inside the manager's private office, slamming the heavy mahogany door behind them. In the quiet room, the air felt thick and cold. Jessica ripped her phone out of her bridal clutch on the desk. Her thumb pressed my number again and again. "Pick up!" she screamed at the phone, pacing across the hardwood floor in her silk heels. "Pick up, you miserable drifter!" Across the room, Brenda leaned against the edge of a mahogany desk, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The polished, elegant mother of the bride was gone. Her hands trembled as she clutched her beaded handbag. "Mom, do something?" Jessica cried out, turning on Brenda. "Pull out your credit card and pay it. We can deal with Calantha tomorrow. Just pay the bill, so Ryan does not see this mess." Brenda swallowed hard, avoiding her daughter's frantic gaze. "I cannot just pay $85,000 right now," Brenda whispered. "Why not?" Jessica demanded, stepping right into her space. "You have the inheritance money from Aunt Claire. You told me you kept the family trust in a high-yield account for emergencies. This is an emergency. My whole wedding is about to end before I even walk down the aisle." Brenda pressed her trembling hand over her mouth. She looked toward the closed office door, terrified someone outside might hear them. "Jessica, listen to me," Brenda rasped, her voice breaking. Out on the coastal road, my phone vibrated in the cup holder for the 6th time. I glanced at the screen, saw her name flashing, and pushed the silent button on my steering wheel. I pulled my car into a small gravel lookout spot overlooking the rocky shore, stepped out, and leaned against the hood. The ocean wind whipped through my hair. I knew exactly what Brenda was failing to tell my sister in that office. There was no inheritance from Aunt Claire. There was no secret family trust sitting in a bank account. The story they had fed to Ryan and his prominent family was built entirely on smoke and mirrors. And while Jessica was screaming into a silent phone, a sharp knock echoed against the manager's office door back at the manor. Ryan Foster pushed the door open. He was 34 years old, dressed in a dark tuxedo with a single white rose pinned to his lapel. He looked at his bride crying in the corner, then at his future mother-in-law looking pale against the desk, and finally, at Marcus, standing near the window with a digital tablet in his hands. "Is everything all right in here?" Ryan asked, his brow furrowing as he looked around the room. "The coordinator said there is a delay with the ceremony music." Jessica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at her mother, waiting for another quick lie to save them. Before Brenda could invent a story, Marcus turned toward the groom, holding out the tablet. "We are discussing an unpaid venue balance of $85,000, Ryan Marcus said calmly. The VIP courtesy hold was voided when the primary contract holder, Calantha Young, was turned away at the entrance gate. Ryan blinked, taking a slow step into the room. He looked at Jessica, his expression shifting from confusion to cold disbelief. "Calantha," Ryan repeated slowly. "You told my family she was a waitress who did not show up because she was ashamed of her life. Why is her name on our venue contract?" Jessica shrank back against the wall, her hands trembling as the story she had spent years building began to crack down the middle. While Ryan stood in that quiet office demanding to know why my name was on the venue contract, I leaned against my car, miles away, and watched the waves crash against the rocky Rhode Island shoreline. I knew Jessica was trapped. She could never tell her honorable groom the real reason I owned the estate. To explain the venue, she would have to explain the money. And to explain the money, she would have to confess to a betrayal they committed against me 11 years ago. The lie they fed Ryan did not start when Jessica got engaged. The story that I was a lazy, ungrateful failure was born on a Tuesday morning when I was 18 years old. Back then, I worked every weekend and most evenings at a local diner. My goal was simple. I wanted to pay for state college without taking out loans. I saved every single dollar I earned in a joint bank account my mother had opened for me when I was a teenager. Over 3 years of carrying heavy trays and smelling like fried food, I deposited $8,000. It was my entire future. That Tuesday, I walked into the local bank branch to request a certified check for my first tuition installment. The teller typed my account number into her computer. She squinted at the screen, hit another button, and printed a receipt. She slid the small piece of paper across the counter. Her eyes held a look of deep pity. The receipt showed a remaining balance of $14.12. I did not understand. I asked her to check again. The teller gently explained that the primary account holder, Brenda Young, had initiated a wire transfer the previous afternoon, draining the funds entirely. I ran the 2 miles back to our house. My chest burned and my hands shook as I pushed open the front door. I found Brenda in the living room. She was unboxing a set of expensive imported leather luggage. Jessica sat on the sofa nearby holding up a brand new designer coat, inspecting the stitching with a satisfied smile. I stood in the doorway, clutching the bank receipt in my fist. I asked my mother where my tuition money went. Brenda did not flinch. She did not look guilty. She carefully folded a piece of tissue paper, placed it inside the leather suitcase, and turned to face me with a cold, calculating stare. "Your sister needs it for her semester in France," Brenda said. "Paris is expensive, Calantha. She cannot walk around Europe looking like a peasant." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. I looked at Jessica. My older sister just shrugged, pulling the designer coat over her shoulders. "I worked for 3 years to earn that money," I said, my voice cracking. "That was for my education. You stole my future so Jessica could buy clothes." Brenda slammed the suitcase shut. The loud snap of the metal locks echoed in the living room. She marched toward me, stopping inches from my face. "You are not ambitious like your sister Brenda hissed. Jessica has potential. She is going to marry well and elevate this family. You are content wiping tables and serving coffee. You do not need a college degree to do what you do. Do not be so selfish with our family resources." The floor felt like it was tilting under my feet. My own mother had taken thousands of dollars I bled for, handed it to her favorite child, and then blamed me for being upset. I told them I would call the police. I told them I would report the theft. Jessica let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Go ahead," Jessica said, admiring her reflection in the hallway mirror. "It is a joint account, Calantha. Mom is the primary signer. She has every legal right to withdraw those funds. The police will laugh you out of the station. Stop acting like a victim. You are not really acting like family right now." That was the exact moment the narrative was born. To justify stealing my money, they had to turn me into a villain. They labeled me the ungrateful scapegoat. They decided my hard work meant nothing, and my anger was just jealousy. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I turned around, walked into my small bedroom, and packed a single duffel bag. I gathered my clothes, my high school diploma, and my toothbrush. I walked out the front door 10 minutes later. Neither of them tried to stop me. Brenda was too busy discussing flight upgrades with Jessica to even watch me leave. That night, I slept on a worn-out sofa in the break room of a budget hotel in downtown Providence. The manager knew me from the diner and took pity on my situation. The next morning, she offered me a job cleaning rooms. While Jessica flew across the ocean to sip wine near the Eiffel Tower, on my dime, I put on a cheap uniform and scrubbed toilets. I worked double shifts. My hands cracked from harsh cleaning chemicals. My back ached from flipping heavy mattresses. I spent my holidays emptying trash cans for traveling businessmen. It was exhausting, brutal work, but it paid for a tiny apartment and kept a roof over my head. Meanwhile, Brenda and Jessica began their damage control back home. My extended relatives started leaving voicemails on my cheap prepaid phone. My aunts and cousins scolded me. They told me Brenda was heartbroken. They said I had abandoned my loving mother just because I was too lazy to contribute to the household bills. Brenda had spun a beautiful, tragic story for the whole town. She claimed I dropped out of life because I lacked ambition. She told everyone I demanded money from her, and when she refused, I ran away to live as a drifter. They erased my stolen savings from their history. They replaced my theft with their victimhood. I listened to those voicemails, sitting on the floor of my empty apartment. I realized very quickly that defending myself was useless. Brenda had already poisoned the well. People believe the story they hear first, especially when it is delivered by a weeping mother. So I made a choice. I stopped returning phone calls. I changed my number. I let them believe their own lies. Silence became my weapon. I realized that as long as they thought I was a struggling failure, they would never ask me for another dime. They would leave me alone. Their arrogance became my shield. I poured all my anger into my work at the hotel. I moved from housekeeping to the front desk. I learned how the booking software operated. I memorized the vendor contracts. I watched how the managers handled high-stress disputes. I soaked up every piece of knowledge the hospitality industry offered, trading my stolen college education for raw, real-world experience. Every time I scrubbed a floor or balanced a ledger, I thought of Brenda, snapping that leather suitcase shut. I used the memory of their smug faces as fuel. They needed me to be invisible, so they could hide their guilt. I accepted the invisibility, knowing it was the only way I could build an empire without their toxic hands tearing it down. I spent the next decade climbing higher than they ever thought possible. And because they never bothered to look down, they never saw me coming. I did not just work hard. I sacrificed my entire youth to escape their shadow. From the front desk of that budget hotel in Providence, I started taking night classes online. I paid for my business degree one semester at a time using the cash tips I earned from carrying luggage and arranging taxi rides for tourists. My 20s were a blur of 80-hour work weeks. I learned profit margins, vendor negotiations, and crisis management. I studied how luxury operated from the inside out. I watched wealthy families interact, taking mental notes on their expectations and their demands. By 23, I became the regional operations director for a mid-sized hospitality group. I did not take vacations. I did not go to parties. I channeled every ounce of my anger into my career. I wanted to build a fortress so high that my mother and sister could never reach me again. When I turned 25, I crossed paths with Jonathan Sterling. Jonathan was an aging real estate investor with a portfolio of failing historic properties across Rhode Island. He possessed the capital, but lacked the energy and the vision to turn those crumbling estates around. I saw an opportunity. I sat across from him in a dark, quiet steakhouse and offered him a deal. I laid out a 5-year restructuring plan. I would run the daily operations, fix the hemorrhaging budgets, and rebuild his brand from the ground up. In exchange, I did not want a salary increase. I wanted equity. I wanted my name on the deeds. Jonathan agreed. We rebranded the company as Sterling Young Estates. We purchased bankrupt oceanfront manors, gutted them, and transformed them into the premier luxury venues of New England. By my 27th birthday, I held the title of Chief Operating Officer. I was a silent managing partner. I wore tailored suits, managed a staff of hundreds, and reviewed quarterly earnings in the millions. My signature finalized multi-million-dollar acquisitions. My name opened heavy wooden doors across the state. Yet back in my hometown, Brenda and Jessica were still spinning their tragic tale. According to my mother's country club friends and our extended relatives, I was an unstable temp worker who could not hold down a steady job. Brenda played the role of the heartbroken, long-suffering mother to perfection. She attended Sunday services and charity luncheons, shaking her head sadly whenever my name came up. She painted herself as the victim of a rebellious, ungrateful daughter. Once a year, around the second week of December, a thin white envelope would arrive at my post office box. Brenda never asked for my actual home address. She preferred the narrative that I was bouncing between cheap apartments. Inside the envelope, she always placed a generic holiday card and a $20 gift certificate to a discount grocery store. Her handwriting always included a sharp little note. "Hope you are finding your way. Try to stay out of trouble this year. We are praying for your stability. Love, Mom." I never cashed those certificates. I kept them inside a drawer of my solid oak desk right in my corner office overlooking the Providence skyline. They served as a constant reminder. Every time I felt a weak, fleeting urge to call my mother to share a business victory or seek some kind of maternal validation, I would open that drawer and look at those cheap cards. They reminded me exactly who she was. They reminded me how little she thought of me. While I was turning bankrupt properties into gold mines, Jessica bounced from one low-level marketing job to another. She constantly complained about her bosses, demanding promotions she never earned. She felt entitled to success without putting in the hours. Brenda subsidized Jessica's expensive lifestyle, buying her designer shoes and funding her weekend trips to vineyards, all to keep up the appearance of high society wealth. They were living a lie, funding a fantasy with money they did not have. My Aunt Miriam would occasionally leave pitying voicemails on my phone, suggesting I should move back into Brenda's basement to get on my feet. She told me my mother was exhausted from worrying about my future. I sat in my luxury vehicle, listening to those messages. I could have sent Miriam a screenshot of my bank account. I could have mailed her a glossy, gold-embossed brochure of my oceanfront estates. I held the power to shatter their entire narrative with a single phone call. But I chose to stay quiet. I embraced the invisibility because it was my armor. If I proved I was wealthy, Brenda would instantly claim credit for my resilience. She would tell everyone her tough love pushed me to succeed. Jessica would start demanding a piece of the pie, claiming we were blood and owed each other financial support. Correcting their lies meant opening the door. I knew exactly what they would do if they got inside. They would drain me dry all over again, just like they did when I was 18. I preferred being their scapegoat from a distance over being their bank account up close. My peace of mind was worth far more than their public approval. I let them believe their own arrogant lies. I let them think they were superior. My shield of invisibility worked flawlessly for a long time. I built my empire in the dark. I secured my future with ironclad contracts and relentless determination. But secrets always have a way of colliding with reality. While I was stacking profits and acquiring premium real estate, Brenda was stacking hidden debt. She was trying to fund a champagne lifestyle on a tap-water budget. Her vanity was a bottomless pit, and she was digging it deeper every single day. The protective wall I built around myself was solid, but it was about to face a severe test. The lie Brenda spun for the town was finally running out of credit. 2 years ago, the consequences of her reckless spending caught up with her in the worst possible way. She was about to lose the one thing she valued most, and her desperation would force her to dial the number of the daughter she pretended did not exist. 2 years ago, my office phone rang. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The caller ID showed a local Rhode Island number I did not recognize. I pressed the flashing green button on my desk phone, expecting a vendor or a real estate broker. Instead, I heard sobbing. Calantha Brenda gasped into the receiver. I stopped typing. I had not heard my mother's voice in 3 years. She sounded breathless, frantic, and small. "The bank is taking the house," Brenda cried. "They sent a letter. The sheriff is coming next week to change the locks. I do not know what to do." I leaned back in my leather chair. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window of my office. For a decade, Brenda funded her country club memberships, Jessica's designer handbags, and European vacations with credit cards. She took out a second mortgage on our childhood home to keep up the appearance of wealth. The bill finally arrived. "How far behind are you?" I asked, my voice flat. $60,000, Brenda whispered. She started making excuses. She blamed the economy. She blamed the predatory lending rates. She blamed the mail carrier for losing the warning notices. She never once took responsibility for the luxury cars parked in her driveway or the racks of unworn clothes in her closet. She asked if I had any savings. She assumed I was still working double shifts at a hotel. She thought I might have a few $100s to spare so she could buy herself one more week. I did not yell at her. I did not remind her about the $8,000 she stole from my college fund. I knew that throwing her past sins in her face would only make her play the victim louder. "I will make a few calls," I told her. "I will see if there are any state assistance programs." I hung up the phone. I sat in silence for a long time. I did not owe Brenda anything. She threw me away. She rewrote my history to hide her theft. Leaving her to face the consequences of her greed would have been easy. But I remembered the house. I remembered the small bedroom where I studied for my high school exams. I could not stomach the thought of a bank auctioning off those walls. I picked up my phone and called my corporate attorney. I instructed him to form an anonymous limited liability company in Delaware. 2 days later, my attorney contacted Brenda's mortgage lender. The anonymous company wired $60,000 directly to the bank, clearing the arrears and paying the mortgage forward for the next 12 months. Brenda received a formal letter stating a private investor had purchased her debt and forgiven it. My name appeared nowhere on the paperwork. I did this to keep a roof over her head. I wanted no gratitude. I wanted no contact. I assumed the terrifying reality of almost losing her home would force Brenda to change her spending habits. I thought she would sell the luxury cars, cut up the credit cards, and live quietly. I underestimated her vanity. Instead of being humbled by the anonymous bailout, Brenda used it to invent an entirely new reality. A few months later, I received an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner at the house. Brenda sent an actual letter, not a cheap card. The thick cream envelope felt heavy in my hands. The note inside said she wanted to gather the family to share some wonderful news. Curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see how she handled the near foreclosure. I drove to the house that Thursday, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. I parked down the street, keeping my expensive company car out of sight. I walked through the front door and smelled roasted turkey and expensive wine. The living room looked different. New velvet curtains hung in the windows. A massive crystal vase sat on the dining table. My Aunt Miriam and several cousins sat in the living room. Jessica sat in the center of the sofa, holding a glass of wine, wearing a brand new diamond tennis bracelet. Brenda walked out of the kitchen wearing a silk blouse. She smiled when she saw me. It was not a motherly smile. It was the smile of a woman holding a winning lottery ticket. Calantha, Brenda said loudly so the whole room could hear. I am so glad you could take time off from your little jobs to join us. I walked into the dining room and took a seat at the far end of the table. During dinner, Brenda clinked her fork against her wine glass. She stood up, beaming at her guests. I want to give thanks for the incredible blessing our family received this year, Brenda announced. As many of you know, my great-aunt Claire passed away recently. She lived a very quiet life, but she left behind a rather lucrative estate. The lawyers finalized the paperwork last month. I am thrilled to say our family is now very comfortable. I stopped chewing my food. I stared at Brenda. Great-aunt Claire died penniless in a nursing facility 12 years ago. There was no estate. There were no lawyers. Brenda had taken my anonymous $60,000 bailout and spun it into a fairy tale inheritance. She used the cleared mortgage as proof of her new wealth. She convinced the entire family that she was now a woman of independent means. Jessica chimed in, holding up her wrist to show off the new diamonds. It is true, old money, Jessica said, taking a sip of her wine. Mom is setting up a trust for me. It is so stressful dealing with wealth management, but we are learning to navigate our new status. My cousins nodded in awe. Aunt Miriam looked at Brenda with deep respect. They were dancing on a floor I built and paid for. They were using my invisible sacrifice as a prop for their vanity. Brenda looked down the table at me. Her eyes filled with that same condescending pity she always used. Calantha, Brenda said softly. Now that our family has proper resources, maybe we can help you find a real career. You do not have to struggle in the shadows anymore. We can send you to a community college. We have a reputation to uphold now, and we want you to represent the family well. My hands gripped my napkin under the table. The urge to stand up, pull out my phone, and show them the wire transfer receipt burned in my chest. I could have destroyed the lie right there. I could have watched Brenda's face crumble in front of Aunt Miriam and the cousins, but I remembered the rule of Grape Vengeance. I let the lie stand. If I exposed the truth, they would know I had money. The begging would start the next day. The guilt trips would follow. Brenda would demand a monthly allowance. Jessica would demand a salary for doing nothing. I would lose my peace. So I took a bite of turkey. I looked at Brenda and smiled a tight, polite smile. I am fine where I am, I said. Jessica rolled her eyes and muttered something about me being a lost cause. They went back to discussing their fake wealth, their imaginary investments, and their plans for the future. I sat in silence watching them build a house of cards. I knew a storm was coming. I knew that fake wealth requires real money to maintain. Brenda was writing checks her reality could not cash. That Thanksgiving dinner changed everything for Jessica. She took the lie and ran with it. She started attending high society charity galas, wearing designer clothes Brenda bought on new secret credit cards. Jessica bragged to anyone who would listen about her family's old money and her lucrative trust fund. She used my silent bailout to elevate her social status. She used it to infiltrate circles she never belonged in. And 6 months later, that fake inheritance helped her catch the attention of a man named Ryan Foster. Ryan came from genuine Rhode Island wealth. His family valued integrity, honesty, and quiet success. Jessica knew Ryan would never look twice at a woman drowning in debt. So she put on a mask, played the role of a wealthy heiress, and trapped him in a relationship built entirely on Brenda's lies. When Ryan proposed, Jessica realized she had a major problem. She needed a wedding that matched the fake fortune she had bragged about for a year. She needed an event so grand, so expensive, that Ryan's prominent family would never suspect the truth. That desperation would soon force Brenda to pick up the phone and call the scapegoat daughter one more time. Ryan Foster grew up sailing off the coast of Rhode Island. His family owned commercial real estate across New England, but you would never guess their net worth by looking at them. The Fosters did not wear clothing covered in giant designer logos. They drove 10-year-old sedans and wore faded wool sweaters. They possessed genuine generational wealth, which meant they never felt the need to prove their bank account balances to strangers. Ryan valued quiet integrity. He respected honesty and traditional family loyalty above everything else. When he met Jessica, she mirrored those exact values back to him. She played the role of a refined daughter from a comfortable old money background. Ryan thought her family was just like his. He had no idea the expensive dinners Brenda hosted were paid for with a high-interest credit card hidden inside a kitchen drawer. He did not know the diamond tennis bracelet on Jessica's wrist was purchased on an installment plan. Jessica projected an image of effortless luxury, and Ryan fell for the illusion. He proposed during a quiet weekend trip to Maine. Jessica came home flashing a heavy sapphire engagement ring. The entire town buzzed with the news. The Foster family welcomed Jessica with open arms, treating her like an equal. But securing the ring was only the first half of my sister's trap. Now she faced a terrifying reality. She had to host a wedding that matched the fake fortune she had been bragging about for a year. She could not book a local banquet hall. A cheap venue would raise immediate questions from Ryan's parents. Jessica needed a location that screamed elite status. She spent weeks touring the most exclusive properties in the state before walking onto the grounds of the oceanfront manor in Newport. The estate featured manicured cliffside gardens, historic architecture, and a private beach. It was the crown jewel of coastal venues. It was also the most profitable property in the Sterling Young Estates portfolio. My portfolio. Jessica marched into Brenda's kitchen and dropped the glossy venue brochure onto the granite counter. The rental fee was $85,000. That price did not include a single floral arrangement, a single catered meal, or a single glass of wine. Brenda looked at the number printed on the brochure and felt the air leave her lungs. The fake inheritance from Aunt Claire was gone. Brenda had drained every last cent of her remaining credit just to maintain their daily country club lifestyle. She had zero savings. She had no secret trust fund. She was drowning in debt, and her golden child was demanding an $85,000 check to secure the venue by the end of the week. Panic set in. Brenda knew if she told Jessica the truth, her daughter would turn against her. Worse, if Jessica had to downsize the wedding, Ryan's family might start looking closely at Brenda's finances. The entire house of cards would collapse. So Brenda did the only thing she knew how to do when backed into a corner. She picked up her phone and called the daughter she spent the last decade pretending did not exist. I was sitting in my corner office in Providence, reviewing the quarterly earnings for the oceanfront manor, when my direct line rang. I answered, and the crying began immediately. "Calantha, you have to help us!" Brenda sobbed into the receiver. I put my pen down. I listened to her hyperventilate. "Jessica is marrying Ryan Foster," Brenda cried. "His parents are expecting a proper society wedding. Jessica found the perfect venue in Newport, but they want a massive deposit up front. My funds are tied up in investments right now. I cannot liquidate them in time." She was still lying. Even while begging for a bailout, she refused to admit she was broke. "I cannot give you cash," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. Brenda stopped crying. The manufactured sadness vanished, replaced instantly by vicious anger. "You selfish girl," Brenda hissed. "Your sister finally has a chance to secure her future. She is marrying into a wonderful family. If we lose this venue, Ryan's parents will think we are poor. They will look down on her. If Jessica loses this engagement, it is your fault for abandoning your own blood." She used the same toxic manipulation she always used. She tried to make me responsible for her reckless choices. She tried to make me the villain in her self-created disaster. I leaned back in my leather chair. I looked at the financial report on my desk. The logo for the oceanfront manor sat at the top of the page. The irony was almost suffocating. I could have hung up the phone. I could have let her fail. But I was so tired of the drama. I was exhausted by the constant looming threat of her financial ruin dragging me back into the mud. I realized this wedding was my chance to buy my permanent freedom. If I gave them this one final thing, they could never claim I owed them anything ever again. The debt would be settled forever. "I will not wire you a single dollar," I told her. "But I can solve your problem." Brenda went silent on the other end of the line. "I am a silent managing partner at Sterling Young Estates," I explained. "We own the oceanfront manor." I heard a sharp intake of breath. For 10 years, she told everyone I was a struggling temp worker. Now she was staring at the reality that I owned the exact luxury estate her golden child was begging to rent. "I can apply an executive override," I continued. "I will zero out the $85,000 venue fee. The space is yours. But I have one condition." "Name it," Brenda whispered. "My name stays off all public paperwork," I said. "You do not tell Jessica I paid for it. You do not tell Ryan. I will attend the wedding as a quiet guest. I want no credit, no speeches, and no drama. I want peace." I thought forcing her to keep my secret would protect my quiet life. I thought she would be relieved to hide her financial failure from her favorite daughter. I was right, but for the wrong reasons. "Thank you, Calantha," Brenda said, her voice dripping with sudden, sickening sweetness. "I promise, no one will know a thing." I ended the call. I opened my laptop, logged into the venue management system, and applied the zero balance courtesy waiver to Jessica's event file. I linked the waiver directly to my personal attendance, a standard corporate security measure to prevent unapproved free events. I thought I had orchestrated a clean transaction. I did not realize I had just handed Brenda the ultimate weapon. The second our phone call ended, Brenda walked back into her kitchen. She looked at Jessica, who was pacing across the tile floor, chewing her fingernails. Brenda smiled. She picked up the venue brochure and tapped it against the counter. "Do not worry about a thing," sweetheart, Brenda told her daughter. "I just moved some funds around from the family trust. I am paying for the entire venue in cash." Jessica threw her arms around her mother, screaming with joy. Brenda stole my silent sacrifice and instantly wore it as her own crown. She plotted to use my $85,000 gift as undeniable proof of her immense wealth. She planned to sit across from Ryan's prominent parents and brag about securing the most expensive estate in Newport without breaking a sweat. She agreed to keep me invisible not to protect my peace, but to protect her own arrogant lie. The trap was fully set. They secured the location. They secured the groom. But maintaining the illusion required keeping the real owner of the estate pushed into the shadows. And 3 months before the wedding, their desperation to keep me hidden would result in a brutal, deliberate insult. 3 months before the wedding date, I sat alone in my corner office in downtown Providence. It was a Friday evening. My staff had already gone home for the weekend, leaving the corporate suite perfectly quiet. The only light came from the glow of my computer monitor and the street lamps shining through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I had just finished reviewing a stack of vendor contracts for the upcoming quarter. I poured myself a glass of water, picked up my phone, and opened a social media app to clear my head. The first item on my feed was a photo album posted by my cousin Melissa. The location tag read Oakwood Valley Country Club, one of the most exclusive and expensive private clubs in Rhode Island. I stopped scrolling. I stared at the screen. The first photo showed a sprawling outdoor patio decorated with towering arches of pastel roses. Waiters in pristine white jackets carried silver trays lined with crystal champagne flutes. In the center of the patio stood Jessica. She wore a tailored white silk dress and a delicate floral crown. A satin sash rested across her shoulder, displaying the words bride-to-be in gold lettering. It was a bridal shower, a lavish, high society event designed to mimic the lifestyle of genuine wealth. I swiped to the next photo. Brenda was standing next to Jessica, beaming at the camera. Brenda wore a designer pantsuit that I knew for a fact cost more than her monthly car payment. She stood arm in arm with several older women draped in pearls and cashmere. One of those women was Ryan Foster's mother, a true matriarch of New England high society. I had not received an invitation. I had not even received a text message mentioning the date. A sharp, painful knot formed in my stomach. I traced my thumb over the edge of my phone case. This was not an oversight. This was a deliberate, calculated exclusion. My own mother and sister hosted a milestone family event and intentionally left me off the guest list. I swiped to the final slide in Melissa's post. It was a short video clip. I tapped the screen, and the sound of polite applause filled my quiet office. In the video, Jessica stood at the head of a long banquet table, holding a microphone. She smiled at her guests, her eyes gleaming with pride. "I want to raise a glass to my incredible mother," Jessica said, her voice echoing over the country club speakers. "She has worked tirelessly to give me the wedding of my dreams. Not only did she organize this breathtaking shower, but she also generously paid the $85,000 venue fee for our Newport estate, in cash. She wanted Ryan and me to start our marriage without a single worry." The guests in the video clapped warmly. Ryan's mother nodded in approval, raising her glass toward Brenda. Brenda placed a hand over her heart, looking remarkably humble, playing the role of the generous, wealthy benefactor to absolute perfection. The video ended. The screen went dark. I sat frozen in my leather chair. The sheer audacity stole the breath from my lungs. I was funding the very event they were using to elevate their social standing, and they were using that exact same event to shut me out in the cold. I unlocked my phone and dialed Brenda's cell number. She answered on the third ring. I heard the faint sound of a jazz trio playing in the background, mixed with the clinking of silverware and polite laughter. "Calantha," Brenda said, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "I am a little busy right now. We are just wrapping up at the club. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Why was I not invited to my sister's bridal shower?" I asked. My tone held no warmth. I did not yell, but I made sure every word landed like a stone. The background noise shifted. I could hear Brenda walking away from the crowd, her heels clicking against a hard floor until a heavy door closed, shutting out the jazz music. When she spoke again, the forced sweetness vanished entirely. "Jessica did not want anyone asking about your waitressing job in front of Ryan's mother," Brenda stated. Her voice was clinical, devoid of any maternal guilt. "It is just too awkward, Calantha. We are sitting with prominent people today. Ryan's aunts are here, the wives of his father's board members are here. You would feel out of place anyway. We were trying to spare your feelings." They were not sparing my feelings. They were protecting their own fraudulent narrative. They needed the fictional version of me, the struggling failure, to stay hidden in the shadows, so their fake fortune could shine in the spotlight. "You stood in front of those prominent people and let Jessica thank you for spending $85,000 in cash," I said. "You are bragging about money you never had, paying for a venue you do not own." Brenda let out a sharp gasp. Panic flooded her voice. "You promised no drama. Brenda whispered harshly. She sounded terrified that someone might walk into the hallway and hear her. You promised to stay quiet about the arrangement. Do not ruin this for your sister just because you feel left out of a simple luncheon. You agreed to be a quiet guest at the wedding. That is the deal. She hung up the phone. The line went dead. I lowered the receiver. The silence of the corporate suite pressed against my ears. I turned my chair toward my desk and woke up my computer screen. I clicked on the Sterling Young Estates internal management software. I typed Jessica's last name into the search bar. The event file for the Oceanfront Manor popped up instantly. I opened the billing tab. The zero balance courtesy waiver sat right there on the screen, highlighted in green. I moved my mouse. I hovered the white cursor directly over the red delete button. One click. That was all it would take. One simple click of my index finger and the waiver would vanish from the system. The automated software would immediately generate an invoice for $85,000 and email it directly to Brenda's inbox with a bold red banner demanding payment within 24 hours. The urge to click that button burned in my chest. I wanted to watch their fake empire crumble. I wanted Ryan's dignified mother to see Brenda default on a luxury estate. My finger rested heavy on the mouse. Then I stopped. I pulled my hand away and leaned back. If I canceled the waiver now, 3 months before the ceremony, I would give Brenda the one thing she did not deserve. I would give her time. If the invoice arrived today, Brenda would twist the story. She would cry to Jessica, claiming the venue made a terrible administrative error. She would blame a glitch in the system. Worse, if they figured out I revoked the waiver, Brenda would paint me as a jealous, bitter sister who sabotaged the wedding out of spite. Jessica would run to Ryan, weeping about her cruel sibling ruining her big day. The truth about their fake wealth would get buried underneath their endless tears and victimhood. Ryan's family would end up comforting Jessica instead of questioning her. I refused to let them control the narrative anymore. True justice does not happen in the shadows, and it does not happen with a 3-month warning. I closed the billing software. I logged out of the system. I decided to let them have their perfect lie. I would honor my end of the bargain. I would attend the wedding as a quiet guest. I would put on a nice dress, stand in the background, and let them parade around in front of Ryan's family. I would let their arrogance march them straight toward the edge of a cliff, completely unaware of the drop waiting below. The tension inside me settled into a cold, hard focus. The bridal shower snub was a painful reminder of who they truly were, but it also solidified my resolve. I owed them no protection. The calendar pages turned. The weeks ticked by, bringing the summer wedding date closer. The lies Brenda and Jessica told grew larger and heavier, carrying their own gravitational pull. They spent more money they did not have, securing high-end florists and gourmet caterers confident the venue fee was permanently handled. They thought they had outsmarted everyone. They thought my silence meant submission. But the night before the ceremony, the entire dynamic would shift. The rehearsal dinner would bring me face to face with the groom's family for the very first time. And in the hallway of a high-end restaurant, a conversation meant for private ears would transform this situation from a quiet family dispute into a betrayal so deep I would vow to never show them mercy again. The night before the wedding arrived, with a thick blanket of coastal fog rolling off the Atlantic. The rehearsal dinner took place at a private seafood club overlooking the Newport Harbor. I honored my end of the bargain. I wore a modest charcoal dress, drove my personal sedan instead of my company car, and walked into the dining room prepared to stay invisible for the next few hours. The host directed me to table 9. It was the furthest table from the front, wedged directly next to the swinging wooden doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter rushed past, a blast of hot air carrying the smell of fried garlic and dish soap washed over my seat. My dinner companions were distant cousins who spent the entire evening avoiding eye contact with me. They spoke in hushed tones, pausing their conversations whenever I reached for my water glass. At the center of the room, Brenda and Jessica held court. They sat at a long mahogany table decorated with fresh white orchids and silver candles. Jessica wore a silk pearl-colored dress, laughing loudly and touching Ryan's arm every few minutes. Brenda sat next to Ryan's parents, Eleanor and Thomas Foster. Eleanor Foster possessed a quiet grace. She wore a simple navy blazer and minimal jewelry. She did not need to shout to command respect. I watched Brenda lean in close to Eleanor, whispering and nodding, playing the role of the refined matriarch. Brenda held her wineglass by the stem, mimicking Eleanor's exact posture. It was a flawless performance of fake wealth. I focused on my plate of roasted fish. I drank my ice water. I reminded myself that enduring this single evening would buy my permanent freedom. Tomorrow, Jessica would walk down the aisle, the venue debt would be settled, and I would change my phone number for good. Halfway through the main course, the noise of the crowded room became too loud. The clinking glasses and booming laughter gave me a headache. I excused myself from table 9 and walked down a quiet carpeted hallway toward the restrooms. I stepped into the ladies' room. It was empty, smelling of expensive lavender soap. I walked into the furthest stall, locked the door, and took a deep breath, enjoying the rare moment of silence. A minute later, the heavy brass door of the restroom pushed open. The sharp click of stiletto heels echoed against the marble tile, followed by the softer sound of sensible leather flats. I recognized the voices immediately. Jessica and Eleanor Foster. I froze. I held my breath, not wanting to interrupt the bride and her future mother-in-law. I planned to wait for them to leave before stepping out. Eleanor turned on the faucet. The sound of running water filled the room. "It is a lovely dinner," Jessica Eleanor said. Her voice sounded warm, but observant. "Your mother has done a remarkable job putting all of this together. I did notice your sister sitting near the back. She seems very quiet tonight. Is everything all right between you two?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited for Jessica to give a polite, dismissive excuse. I expected her to say we just had different interests and leave it at that. Instead, Jessica let out a long, heavy sigh. It was a theatrical sigh, designed to invoke deep sympathy. "Calantha has always been a drifter," Jessica said softly. "We try so hard to support her, Eleanor, we really do. But she refuses to get a real career. She bounces from one minimum wage job to the next. Mom spends half her nights crying, worrying about what will happen to her." "Oh, I had no idea," Eleanor murmured, her tone softening with genuine pity. "That must be so difficult for your mother." "It is heartbreaking," Jessica continued, leaning into the lie. "Calantha resents us because we expect her to act like an adult. Last year, she got herself into terrible financial trouble. She was almost evicted. Mom had to step in and bail her out of a $60,000 debt just to keep her off the streets. It wiped out a chunk of our family trust. But Mom said we could never let family go homeless, no matter how ungrateful they act." I stood paralyzed inside the stall. My hands curled into tight fists. My fingernails bit into my palms until the skin stung. They were not just ignoring my success. They were actively inverting reality. Jessica took the exact details of Brenda's reckless failure, the $60,000 debt, the threat of eviction, the anonymous bailout, and projected them directly onto me. She weaponized my silent sacrifice to make Brenda look like a selfless savior and to paint me as a parasitic failure in front of the groom's family. "You are marrying into a very strong family," Eleanor said, clearly moved by the fabricated story. "Your mother is a saint for carrying that burden. It explains why Calantha looks so uncomfortable tonight. Shame is a heavy thing to carry. We will just give her space tomorrow." "Thank you, Eleanor," Jessica whispered. "We just want tomorrow to be about positive energy." The audacity burned through my veins like ice water. I funded the roof over Brenda's head. I funded the wedding Jessica would attend tomorrow. I built an empire from the dirt they threw me in. And here they were, feeding my accomplishments to their own vanity, ensuring the foster family would look at me with nothing but disgust and pity. The water shut off. The paper towel dispenser clicked. I unlocked the stall door. The metal latch echoed loudly in the quiet marble room. I pushed the door open and stepped out. Jessica stood in front of the wide mirror, applying a fresh coat of rose lipstick. Eleanor stood next to her, tossing a paper towel into the brass wastebasket. Jessica saw my reflection in the mirror. Her hand jerked. The tube of expensive lipstick smeared a bright red streak across her cheek. The color drained from her face so fast she looked ill. Her eyes widened in pure terror. She knew I heard every single word. Eleanor looked at me, offering a tight, polite, pitying smile. She believed she was looking at a miserable beggar who had nearly bankrupted her generous mother. "Good evening," Calantha Eleanor said gently. I did not respond to Eleanor. I kept my eyes locked on Jessica's reflection in the glass. I walked over to the empty sink next to my sister. I turned on the brass faucet. The water ran cold over my hands. Jessica stood frozen, holding her breath, waiting for the explosion. She braced herself for me to scream, to call her a liar, to expose the truth about the venue and the debt right there in front of Ryan's mother. If I raised my voice, Eleanor would think I was exactly the unhinged, unstable drifter Jessica described. I refused to play the role they wrote for me. I washed my hands in chilling silence. I grabbed a paper towel. I dried my fingers methodically, one by one. I looked at Jessica again. Her chest rose and fell in short, panicked gasps. She looked like a cornered animal realizing the cage door just swung shut. I tossed my paper towel into the basket. I walked past them, pushing the heavy restroom door open, and stepped back into the hallway. I did not return to Table 9. I walked straight out the front doors of the seafood club. The valet brought my car. I handed him a tip, slid behind the wheel, and drove away into the coastal fog. The conflict inside me reached a boiling point. The deal was broken. By feeding that specific lie to the foster family, Jessica crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She guaranteed that Ryan and his parents would view my presence at the wedding as a stain on their perfect day. The voice of reason that told me to stay quiet vanished. The trap was now perfectly, beautifully set. They painted me as a failure to the groom's family, ensuring maximum shock value for the incoming truth. I drove back to my house. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the clock tick toward morning. I knew exactly what Brenda and Jessica would do next. Their fear of me exposing the lie would drive them to make a fatal error. They would try to remove me from the board entirely. And by trying to erase me one final time, they would pull the trigger on their own destruction. The sun rose over Rhode Island. It was wedding day. The sun broke over the Newport coastline, burning away the thick fog from the night before. Inside the bridal suite at the oceanfront manor, the atmosphere felt tense. Jessica sat in a velvet makeup chair, staring into a gold-framed mirror. A professional stylist curled her hair, but Jessica kept shifting her weight, causing the stylist to pause. Jessica had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw my reflection standing behind her in the restroom of the seafood club. She knew I heard the brutal lies she fed to Eleanor Foster. The fear of me exposing her fake wealth gnawed at her stomach. But instead of feeling guilt, Jessica felt deep, simmering anger. She blamed me for her own anxiety. Brenda stood near the window, wearing a silk robe and holding a mimosa. She looked out at the pristine lawns, watching the venue staff arrange hundreds of gold chairs facing the ocean. Brenda breathed in the expensive floral scent filling the room. She felt invincible. She believed she engineered a masterpiece. She secured the wealthy groom, she booked the elite estate, and she fooled high society into believing she belonged among them. Mom, Jessica said, her voice tight. She waved the stylist away, signaling she needed a moment of privacy. The stylist stepped out of the room, pulling the door shut. Brenda turned around, raising an eyebrow. "What is wrong, sweetheart?" she asked. "You look pale." "It is Calantha," Jessica snapped. Her fingers gripped the padded armrests of the chair. "I cannot have her here today. I saw the way she looked at me in the restroom last night. She is bitter. She is jealous. I know she is going to do something to ruin my day." Brenda sighed, walking over to pour herself another splash of champagne. She dismissed the concern with a wave of her hand. "Calantha is a coward," Brenda said smoothly. "She will sit in the back row, eat her free meal, and go back to her miserable little life. She does not have the courage to cause a scene in front of the Foster family." "You did not see her face," Jessica insisted, her voice rising in panic. "She stood there washing her hands, staring at me like a predator. She makes my skin crawl. Every time I look down the aisle, I will be thinking about her sitting there, judging me. Ryan noticed she looked strange last night. What if she corners him at the reception? What if she starts asking him for money?" Brenda stopped pouring. The thought of me begging the groom for cash struck a nerve. Brenda needed the Foster family to believe we were a dynasty of endless resources. The fictional version of me they created, the unstable, desperate drifter, was now a liability. Jessica stood up, her silk robe rustling. She walked over to Brenda and grabbed her wrist. "I want her gone," Jessica demanded. "I want a perfect day. I deserve a perfect day. Seeing her face in the crowd will remind me of the stress she causes us. She brings down the entire aesthetic of this wedding." Brenda looked at her golden child. The delusion they shared ran so deep it clouded basic logic. Brenda did not pause to consider the fact that I held the power to destroy them. She did not remember that I owned the walls surrounding her. She only cared about maintaining the flawless illusion of her own superiority. "You are right," Brenda said, her voice hardening. "She is not really family anyway. She never fit in with our class of people. She has always been a heavy anchor, trying to drag us down." Brenda set her glass on the vanity. She squared her shoulders, embracing the role of the protective, wealthy matriarch. "Do not worry about a thing," Brenda told Jessica. "Focus on your makeup. I will handle your sister." Brenda walked out of the bridal suite. She descended the grand curved staircase of the main house. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished marble steps. She walked with the arrogant stride of a woman who believed she owned the world. She felt powerful. The fake wealth she projected for the last year had become her reality. She forgot it was just a costume. She reached the foyer. The front doors stood wide open, letting the ocean breeze sweep through the entryway. Just outside, the young event coordinator was arranging place cards on the welcome table. A clipboard holding the printed guest list rested next to a digital tablet. A private security guard in a dark suit stood nearby, reviewing his post assignments. Brenda marched straight through the doors and approached the table. "Excuse me," Brenda said, her tone sharp and authoritative. The coordinator looked up, offering a polite smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Young. Can I help you with something?" "I need to make an immediate change to the guest list," Brenda stated, crossing her arms over her chest. "My younger daughter, Calantha Young, is no longer welcome at this event." The coordinator blinked, clearly caught off guard. She reached for the clipboard. "I am sorry, Mrs. Young. Did you say your daughter—" Brenda leaned over the table, her eyes narrowing. "I said what I said. Calantha Young is a disturbed individual. She has been causing severe emotional distress for the bride. We cannot risk her having an episode during the ceremony. Cross her name off the list." The coordinator hesitated. Venue policy required all major guest list changes, especially family members, to be verified by the primary account holder. But Brenda spoke with such aggressive authority, acting like she held the ultimate veto power over the entire estate. Brenda did not wait for the young woman to process the request. She reached across the table, grabbed a silver pen, and dragged it violently across the printed sheet of paper. Thick black ink covered my name. "There," Brenda said, tossing the pen back onto the table. "It is done." She turned her attention to the security guard. "When that woman arrives," Brenda instructed him, pointing a manicured finger toward the driveway, "you turn her away. If she tries to push past you, you call the local authorities and have her removed for trespassing. Do I make myself clear?" The security guard nodded, keeping his face neutral. "Yes, ma'am." Brenda smiled, feeling a rush of adrenaline. She believed she had just executed a flawless power move. She thought she had silenced the one person who could threaten her perfect day. She turned around and walked back into the manor, eager to tell Jessica the problem was permanently solved. Neither Brenda nor Jessica understood how the modern hospitality industry operated. They did not know that a luxury estate, managing millions of dollars in revenue, did not rely on paper lists and ink pens. The moment Brenda walked away, the young coordinator picked up her digital tablet. She opened the venue management application to update the final headcount for the catering staff. She typed my name into the search bar. She tapped the red button labeled Reject Guest. She confirmed the action. Deep inside the server room of the oceanfront manor, a line of code executed. The corporate billing software detected a status change for the primary account holder. The system recognized that Calantha Young the Silent, managing partner of Sterling Young Estates, was no longer marked as an attending guest. The executive override protocol required the physical presence of the authorizing partner. Without that presence, the zero-balance courtesy waiver dissolved instantly. The software automatically updated the ledger. The digital numbers shifted on the screen. A zero balance turned into $85,000. The system generated a formal invoice, applied a same-day liability clause, and flagged the account as critically delinquent. An alert pinged on the tablet of Marcus, the general manager, who was inspecting the floral arrangements on the terrace. Brenda thought her silence was a weapon. She thought crossing out a name on a piece of paper meant she erased my existence. She loaded the gun herself, pointed it directly at her own feet, and pulled the trigger out of sheer vanity. The trap snapped shut. The bomb was armed, ticking down the minutes until my car pulled into the driveway. And when I finally walked up to that welcome table, the rejection they threw in my face would serve as the final key turning in the lock. Ryan Foster stood inside the manager's office, with his hand still resting on the brass doorknob. His tailored tuxedo looked sharp against the dark mahogany walls. He looked at the digital tablet in Marcus's hand. He looked at the bold red numbers glaring on the screen. Then he shifted his gaze to his bride. Jessica shrank back against the wall. The lace on her wedding gown rustled loudly in the quiet room. She looked like a ghost. "I asked you a question," Jessica Ryan said. His voice was low and calm. It was the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. "Why is your sister's name on our venue contract?" Jessica opened her mouth, but her throat tightened. She looked at Brenda silently, begging her mother to invent another story. She needed a lifeline. Brenda stepped forward, forcing a laugh that sounded like dry leaves scraping across pavement. "Ryan, sweetheart, this is just a ridiculous administrative error," Brenda said, waving her hand in the air. "You know how these computer systems are. Calantha is always trying to cause trouble. She probably called the front desk and pretended to be someone important just to disrupt the day. We are sorting it out right now. Please go back to the groom's suite." Ryan did not move. He kept his eyes locked on Jessica. "Is that true?" Ryan asked. Jessica nodded frantically. Yes, Ryan. She is obsessed with ruining my life. She is a sick, jealous person." Marcus let out a quiet sigh. He placed his digital tablet flat on the polished wooden desk. He straightened his tie and turned his full attention to Brenda. "No one hacked the system," Mrs. Young Marcus stated, "and no one called the front desk. The billing software operates through secure corporate servers." Brenda slammed her hand down on the desk. The loud smack echoed across the room. Her fake polite demeanor vanished, replaced by the ugly, entitled arrogance she wore behind closed doors. "Listen to me, young man," Brenda snapped. "You are speaking to the wrong people. Do you have any idea who I am? I am Brenda Young. My family holds trust accounts your corporate office would beg to manage. I brought my daughter's business to this estate as a favor. I demand you clear that screen right now. If you do not start the processional music in 5 minutes, I will have your job by sunset." Marcus did not flinch. He did not step back. He looked at Brenda with the cold, detached professionalism of a man who dealt with empty threats every single day. "I know exactly who you are," Brenda Marcus replied. "You are a guest. You hold no authority here. You hold no accounts." Brenda opened her mouth to scream, but Marcus cut her off. "Calantha Young is not a waitressing temp," Marcus said, letting his voice carry to every corner of the room. "She is the chief operating officer of Sterling Young Estates. She is the silent managing partner of this property. Her signature approves every payroll check, every vendor contract, and every VIP waiver in our portfolio. She owns the ground you are standing on. Her physical presence was the sole collateral holding your event together. When you ordered my staff to throw her off the property, you threw away your own funding." The heavy ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner suddenly sounded like a hammer striking an anvil. The color drained from Brenda's face. Her jaw went slack. The illusion she spent a decade building shattered into a million sharp pieces on the floor of that office. The truth hit her with the force of a freight train. The daughter she threw away was the kingmaker. The scapegoat was the landlord. Jessica stumbled forward, grabbing the edge of the desk to keep herself from falling. Her mind could not process the information. "That is a lie," Jessica whispered, shaking her head. "Calantha cleans hotel rooms. She is broke." Marcus tapped the digital screen displaying the primary corporate registration documents. The name Calantha Young sat in bold black letters at the very top. "She offered you a zero-balance courtesy waiver to keep the peace," Marcus said. "And you repaid her by crossing her name off the list? The balance is now $85,000. Will you be paying with a certified check or a wire transfer?" Jessica spun around and looked at her mother. The lie about my career was dead, but the lie about Brenda's wealth was still breathing. Jessica clung to it like a drowning woman holding on to a piece of driftwood. "Mom, write the check," Jessica demanded, her voice cracking. Brenda stared at the floor, unable to make eye contact. "Write the check!" Jessica screamed, her voice tearing through the room. "Use the inheritance from Aunt Claire. Use the family trust. Pay this man his money so I can go get married." Brenda slowly reached for the edge of a leather guest chair. She sank into it, her expensive mother-of-the-bride gown pooling around her ankles. She covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders began to shake. "There is no trust fund," Brenda sobbed. Jessica froze. The silence in the room stretched tight. "What did you just say?" Jessica asked her. Words barely a whisper. Brenda lowered her hands. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in dark streaks. The arrogant matriarch was gone, leaving behind a terrified, bankrupt woman. "Aunt Claire died with nothing," Brenda confessed, her voice trembling. "There was no inheritance. 2 years ago, the bank sent a foreclosure notice for the house. I was $60,000 in debt. I called Calantha and begged for help. An anonymous company paid off the arrears the next day. It was her. She saved the house." Jessica took a step back, looking at her mother like she was a stranger. "You've lied to me," Jessica gasped. "You bought me designer clothes. You told me we were rich." "I did it for you," Brenda cried, reaching out toward her daughter. I needed you to feel special. I needed Ryan's family to respect you. When you picked this venue, I had no money left. I called your sister again. She agreed to waive the fee if she could attend quietly. I lied and said I paid in cash because I wanted you to be proud of me. Jessica covered her mouth. The ultimate betrayal did not come from the sister she hated. It came from the enabler she worshipped. Her entire identity, her high society confidence, her bragging at the bridal shower, all of it was built on a foundation of stolen money and pathetic lies. She had paraded around the country club, wearing diamonds she did not own, mocking the exact person who was secretly keeping a roof over her head. A low, slow clap broke the silence. Ryan stood by the door. His face looked like carved stone. He lowered his hands and stared at the two women he thought he knew. He did not just hear a misunderstanding about a venue bill. He heard the entire confession. He heard the origin of the fake wealth. He heard the truth about the invisible sister. Ryan walked toward Jessica. She reached out for him, her eyes begging for comfort, but he stopped 2 feet away. Last night, Ryan said, his voice stripped of all warmth. You looked my mother in the eye and told her Calantha was a parasite. You told my mother Calantha nearly bankrupted your family. Jessica shook her head, tears ruining her flawless makeup. Ryan, please. I was just trying to protect our image. I was scared of what your parents would think. You sat in a luxury restaurant paid for by my father, Ryan continued, ignoring her tears. And you painted a brilliant, successful woman as a homeless beggar just to make yourself look like a saint. You used her money to buy my family's respect, and then you threw her out like trash on your wedding day. Jessica dropped to her knees, the heavy lace gown collapsing around her. She grabbed the fabric of Ryan's suit pants. I love you, Jessica sobbed. We can fix this. We can pay the venue back later. Please do not leave me. Ryan looked down at her. He saw the ugly, desperate reality hiding beneath the expensive white dress. He saw a woman who would destroy her own blood for a taste of status. He saw a mother who engineered a decade of psychological abuse just to cover up her own financial failure. I am not marrying a fraud, Ryan said. He pulled his leg back, forcing Jessica to let go of his suit. He turned toward Marcus. Cancel the catering, Ryan instructed the manager. Do not serve another glass of wine. Ryan walked out of the office, leaving the door wide open. The sound of the string quartet drifting from the lawn suddenly felt like a funeral march. The wedding was over before it ever began. The villains loaded the gun, pointed it at their own feet, and Ryan Foster just pulled the trigger for them. But the fallout was far from finished. Ryan was a man of deep principle, and walking away was not enough for him. He needed his proud, prominent parents to know exactly who they were dealing with. And he needed the real owner of the estate to return and claim her rightful place. Ryan marched down the wide corridor of the main house. His heavy footsteps echoed against the polished hardwood floors. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the hallway. Outside, the string quartet launched into a classical prelude. Guests sat in their gold chairs, smiling, adjusting their sunglasses, waiting for a fairy tale to begin. Ryan, wait! Jessica screamed. She ran after him. The heavy lace of her custom gown dragged along the floor, snagging on the edge of an antique rug. She did not care. She pushed herself forward, her silk heels slipping on the polished wood. She caught up to him just as he reached the grand foyer. Ryan stopped. He turned around to face her. Jessica reached out, wrapping her trembling fingers around his arm. Her chest heaved, her perfect curls hung in loose, messy strands around her face. Please, Jessica, begged her voice frantic. You are overreacting. We can explain everything. It is just a venue bill. We can pay it back. My mother made a terrible mistake, but you cannot throw our entire relationship away over money. Ryan stared down at her hand, gripping his sleeve. He gently grabbed her wrist and removed her fingers from his jacket. He took one step back, creating a physical boundary between them. "This is not about the money," Jessica Ryan said. His voice was steady, lacking any trace of anger, which made it sound even colder. "My family has resources. We could write a check for $85,000 right now and never notice it is gone. The bill means nothing to me." Jessica blinked, a sudden spark of hope flashing in her eyes. "Then write the check," she whispered, stepping toward him again. "Pay the manager. We can get married, go on our honeymoon, and leave this awful day behind us." Ryan shook his head. He looked at her as if she were a stranger who just wandered off the street. "You do not understand," Ryan said. "You truly do not understand what you did. I am not looking at a woman who made a financial mistake. I am looking at someone who engineered a decade of psychological abuse." Jessica recoiled. Her mouth opened, but she could not find the right words to defend herself. "I listened to your mother in that office," Ryan continued. "I heard the entire story. Calantha bailed your mother out of a foreclosure. She saved your childhood home. Instead of saying thank you, you took her silent sacrifice and used it to buy my family's respect. You spent a year sitting at my dinner table bragging about a fake inheritance, wearing jewelry bought on hidden credit cards, pretending to be a refined heiress." "My mother forced me to do it," Jessica cried. She pointed a shaking finger back down the hallway toward the manager's office. "Brenda told me it was the only way your parents would accept us. She manipulated me, Ryan. I was just following her lead. I was trying to protect our future together." Ryan let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "Your mother did not corner my mother in the restroom last night," Ryan said. "That was you. You stood next to the sinks and told my mother that Calantha was a parasite. You claimed she was a lazy drifter who nearly ruined your family. You projected your mother's exact failure onto the woman who paid for the roof over your head." Jessica swallowed hard. Her tears flowed freely now, ruining her expensive makeup. Ryan stepped closer, towering over her. And then Ryan said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "You woke up this morning, put on that white dress, and ordered the security guard to throw her out. You used her own estate to humiliate her in front of a crowd. You did not just steal her money. You tried to steal her dignity." Brenda emerged from the hallway, rushing toward them. She had tried to fix her running mascara, but she looked like a broken porcelain doll. She reached her hand out toward the groom. "Ryan, please," Brenda pleaded. "She is your bride. She loves you." "Do not speak to me," Ryan commanded. He did not raise his voice, but the sheer authority in his tone stopped Brenda in her tracks. She froze, shrinking back against the wall. Ryan turned his attention to Marcus, who had quietly followed them into the foyer, holding his digital tablet. "Earlier I told you to cancel the catering," Ryan said to the manager. "Change of plans. Put a hold on the kitchen, but do not send the staff home yet. Tell the string quartet to stop playing. Inform the guests there will be a brief delay." Jessica's eyes widened. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "What are you doing?" she asked. Ryan looked through the glass doors at the 200 guests sitting on the lawn. He saw his parents sitting in the front row. His mother was smiling, waiting to welcome Jessica into their family. "My parents are sitting out there right now," Ryan said, turning back to his bride. "They believe your mother is a wealthy benefactor. They believe your sister is a disgrace. They are ready to celebrate a union built entirely on your toxic lies. I will not allow my family to be complicit in your abuse." Ryan pulled his cell phone from his tuxedo pocket. "I am not walking down that aisle," Ryan stated. "I am not standing in front of my friends and swearing my loyalty to a fraud." Jessica let out a loud sob, burying her face in her hands. The reality of her ruined fairy tale finally crushed her. "Marcus," Ryan said, looking at the venue manager. "You have Calantha Young's contact information on the corporate file, correct?" "Yes," Sir Marcus replied. "I have her direct line." "Send the number to my phone," Ryan instructed. Jessica lifted her head, her face twisted in confusion and panic. "Why do you need her number?" she choked out. "She left! She is gone! Let her stay gone!" "Because this wedding does not proceed another inch until she returns," Ryan declared. His words hit Jessica like physical blows. "You want me to beg her to come back?" Jessica asked, her voice cracking with indignant rage. Even now, trapped in her own lies, the golden child refused to surrender her pride. "You want me to humiliate myself in front of my own guests?" "I do not want you to do anything," Ryan said, coldly. "I am going to call her. I am going to ask her to drive back to this estate, and when she walks through those front doors, you and your mother are going to stand in front of my parents and confess every single lie you told." Brenda let out a whimpering gasp. The thought of confessing her bankruptcy to Eleanor Foster was worse than death. It meant social execution. "We cannot do that," Brenda cried, shaking her head. "We will be ruined. We will never be able to show our faces in town again." "That is the price of the truth," Ryan said. He looked at Jessica one last time, offering no sympathy, no warmth, and no forgiveness. "If you want any chance of wearing that ring tomorrow, you will do exactly what I say. The real owner of this estate is going to receive the respect she was denied. We wait for Calantha." Ryan turned his back on his weeping bride. He walked toward a quiet alcove near the front entrance, looking down at his phone, as Marcus sent the contact information. Jessica collapsed onto a velvet bench in the foyer. She stared at the marble floor, her mind spinning. She had spent a year building a flawless trap to secure a wealthy husband. She poured all her energy into erasing the sister she hated. She never expected the trap to snap shut on her own neck. The wedding was officially derailed. The string quartet outside faded into silence. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd on the lawn. The perfect day had become a hostage situation, and the only person holding the key to their release was the exact woman they had just thrown away. Miles away, sitting alone in a small roadside diner, I stared at a cup of black coffee. The ocean fog had cleared, but a different kind of storm was brewing. My phone sat silent on the laminated table. I had no idea that back at the estate, the honorable groom had just drawn a line in the sand, setting the stage for a phone call that would force me to make the hardest decision of my life. I sat in a cracked vinyl booth at a roadside diner 5 miles down the coastal highway. The waitress had dropped off a mug of black coffee 20 minutes earlier, but I had not taken a single sip. The thick ceramic mug felt cold against my palm. Through the greasy glass window of the empty restaurant, I watched expensive luxury cars drive past, heading toward the private beaches of Newport. I felt a hollow ache sitting heavy in my chest. It was not regret. It was the absolute finality of being permanently exiled from my own bloodline. The boundary was finally drawn. I walked away from the luxury estate I owned, leaving my mother and sister to face the financial consequences of their own vanity. I expected to feel victorious after delivering my final words at the welcome table. Instead, I just felt a deep, overwhelming exhaustion. My cell phone vibrated on the laminated table. The screen lit up, breaking my train of thought. The caller ID displayed an unknown local number. I stared at the glowing digital screen. I assumed it was Marcus calling from the management office to confirm the billing protocol and finalize the cancellation of the event. I swiped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear. "This is Calantha," I said, keeping my business voice steady and professional. "Calantha," a man replied. "This is Ryan Foster. I am sorry to interrupt your afternoon." I sat up straight in the vinyl booth. The hollow ache in my chest vanished, instantly replaced by a sudden rush of sharp adrenaline. Ryan was the honorable groom. He was the man my sister desperately wanted to lock down to secure her fake social status. I expected him to sound confused. I expected him to demand answers about the canceled venue or threaten legal action. His voice held no anger toward me. He sounded exhausted, entirely sobered by a harsh, new reality. "Marcus gave me your direct line," Ryan explained. "I am standing in the foyer of the main house. The string quartet has stopped playing on the lawn. My parents are sitting in the front row, wondering why the ceremony is delayed." I looked down at my cold coffee. I told him the zero-balance courtesy waiver was voided the second I was denied entry. I told him he needed to speak directly with the general manager about settling the $85,000 invoice before the staff would resume service. "I know about the invoice," Ryan said quietly. "I also know why your name is on the deed to this property. I know about the $60,000 mortgage bailout. I was standing in the doorway of the manager's office when your mother broke down and confessed everything." The diner around me seemed to fade away. For 11 long years, Brenda and Jessica controlled the family narrative. They painted me as a lazy drifter. They told the world I was a failure who could not hold down a job. They erased my hard work and weaponized my silence to protect their own fragile egos. And now the golden child's prized groom had just listened to the entire ugly truth straight from the mouth of the architect. I did not speak. I did not know what to say. The sudden vindication was staggering, but I kept my emotional guard up. Ryan continued speaking. His tone held deep, genuine remorse. "I called to apologize," Ryan said. "Last night at the rehearsal dinner, Jessica cornered my mother in the restroom. Jessica told my mother that you were a parasite. She said you nearly bankrupted your family and caused your mother endless grief. My family believed her. We looked at you with pity. We judged you based on a toxic, fabricated lie. I am deeply sorry that we were complicit in their cruelty." The Grape Vengeance rule dictated my next move. I did not need to rush back to the estate to gloat. I did not need to rub their faces in the dirt. My silence had done its job perfectly. The trap had sprung, catching the villains in their own web. "You do not owe me an apology, Ryan," I replied. "My family makes a habit of deceiving decent people. You are just their latest victim. The contract is void. You should gather your respectable parents and go home. They do not deserve to sit through this disaster." I thought that would be the end of the conversation. I expected him to thank me, hang up the phone, and leave Jessica crying in the marble foyer. But Ryan Foster was a man of strict principle. Walking away quietly was not enough for him. "I cannot just leave," Ryan insisted. "The guests are still waiting outside. My parents are still expecting a wedding. If I cancel this event right now and walk away, my family will spend the rest of their lives wondering what went wrong. Jessica will spin another lie. Brenda will play the victim again. They will find a way to twist this and blame you for ruining the day." He took a slow breath. I heard the faint sound of footsteps echoing on the hard floor on his end of the line. "I need my parents to know who you really are," Calantha Ryan said. "And I need them to know exactly who Jessica really is before I make any final decisions about signing a marriage license." He was asking me to return. He was asking me to drive back to the property that threw me out like trash just an hour earlier. I hesitated. I looked around the diner. A waitress wiped down a nearby counter smelling faintly of bleach. A truck driver ate a piece of pie in the corner booth. It was quiet here. It was safe. If I stayed in this booth, I protected my hard-earned peace. I could drive back to my luxury apartment in Providence and never deal with Brenda or Jessica again. My quiet life would remain perfectly intact. But if I drove back to Newport, I would shatter their false narrative permanently. I would have to stand in front of 200 wealthy guests and face the family that betrayed me. It would be messy. It would be highly uncomfortable. "Ryan," I said slowly, tracing the edge of the table with my finger. "I do not want to participate in a screaming match with my mother." "There will be no screaming," Ryan promised. "You own this estate. You are the chief operating officer. I want you to walk through those front doors and take what belongs to you." You deserve the respect they stole from you. Please come back." The line went silent. I thought about the 18-year-old girl who stood in a living room clutching a bank receipt, watching her mother buy expensive luggage with stolen tuition money. I thought about the decade of scrubbed toilets and flipped heavy mattresses. I thought about the condescending holiday cards with the cheap $20 gift certificates. I owed it to that 18-year-old girl to finish this. "I will be there in 10 minutes, I said. "Thank you," Ryan replied. I ended the call. I placed my cell phone into my leather purse. I slid out of the cracked vinyl booth. I pulled a crisp $20 bill from my wallet and left it on the laminated table to cover the untouched cup of coffee. I walked out of the diner and stepped into the bright Rhode Island sunshine. I unlocked my sedan and slid behind the steering wheel. I started the engine. I turned the car around, accelerating down the coastal highway toward the manicured lawns of the oceanfront manor. The conflict inside me shifted from hesitant peace to cold, unwavering determination. The isolation was over. The invisible sister was about to become very visible. Jessica and Brenda thought they had survived the worst part of the day. They thought the humiliation in the manager's office was the absolute peak of their punishment. They had no idea that Ryan had just invited the executioner back to the chopping block. As I drove toward the estate gates, I visualized the 200 guests sitting in their gold chairs. I pictured the string quartet standing silently on the green grass. I pictured my mother and sister cowering in the grand foyer, waiting for the groom to make his final move. They were about to learn that crossing my name off a piece of paper did not erase my power. It only unleashed it. The grand return was going to force every single hidden secret into the blinding light of day. And the reckoning would start the exact second my shoes hit the polished marble floor of my own house. I pulled my sedan through the towering wrought iron gates of the oceanfront manor for the second time that day. The tires crunched over the pristine white gravel. The scene looked vastly different than it had just an hour ago. The manicured lawns no longer held the quiet anticipation of a fairy tale wedding. The atmosphere felt thick and heavy. 200 guests shifted uncomfortably in their gold chairs. The string quartet had stopped playing. The musicians stood near the cliffside terrace, awkwardly holding their instruments, waiting for instructions that never came. Wealthy socialites whispered behind their hands, checking their expensive watches. I bypassed the main guest lot and pulled my car directly into the reserved parking space near the side entrance of the main house. A heavy wooden sign marking the space read, "Managing Partner." The security guard stood near the brick pathway. This was the same man Brenda had ordered to throw me off the property. He watched me step out of my vehicle. He looked at the reserved parking sign, then looked at me, his face turning pale. He took a quick step back, clearing the path, offering a stiff nod of respect. I walked up the stone steps and pushed the heavy glass doors open. The air conditioning inside the foyer washed over me. Ryan Foster stood near the grand staircase. He had removed the white rose from his tuxedo lapel. He looked exhausted, carrying the heavy burden of a man who just watched his entire future crumble. When he saw me walk through the doors, he straightened his posture. "Thank you for coming back," Ryan said, his voice echoing in the quiet entryway. I did not offer a polite smile. I just nodded. "Where are they?" I asked. "In the manager's office," Ryan replied, gesturing down the long hallway. "They have not moved." I walked past the groom. My heels clicked against the polished marble floor. I did not feel the hollow ache in my chest anymore. I felt cold. I felt focused. I reached the mahogany door of the office, turned the brass handle and pushed it open. The room smelled of stale perfume and sweat. Jessica sat slumped on the leather sofa. Her custom lace gown looked wrinkled and heavy. She held a damp tissue in her hand, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Brenda sat in a chair near the corner, staring blankly at the floor. The arrogant matriarch who had strutted across the lawn an hour earlier was completely gone. Marcus stood behind his desk, holding his digital tablet. Another man stood near the large window overlooking the gardens. It was Jonathan Sterling, my business partner. Jonathan was 60 years old. He wore a sharp charcoal suit and carried a commanding presence. We built this luxury portfolio together. He knew the brutal 80-hour weeks I worked. He knew I slept on an office sofa during our first major acquisition because I could not afford an apartment. When the billing software locked the estate, Marcus had immediately called Jonathan to report the catastrophic failure of a VIP event. Jonathan had driven straight to Newport. Jonathan looked at Brenda with pure, unhidden disgust. He knew my history. He knew I fought my way out of poverty without a single safety net. Standing in this office, listening to the truth unfold, he finally understood exactly who pushed me into that poverty. Calantha, Jonathan said softly, offering me a nod of deep respect. The room is yours. Jessica lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her jaw dropped when she saw me standing in the doorway. She expected me to look broken. She expected me to look like the wounded scapegoat she had spent a lifetime kicking. Instead, I stood tall. I did not yell. I did not cry. I channeled the chilling calm of a chief executive officer handling a hostile negotiation. You wanted me invisible, Brenda, I said. My voice cut through the stuffy air of the office. You wanted a fairy tale, Jessica. You wanted to play the role of the wealthy elite. Brenda flinched, pulling her knees tightly together. She could not force herself to look me in the eye. But fake wealth has a real price. I continued stepping further into the room. You paid for your fairy tale with my stolen college fund. You paid for your country club lunches with my secret mortgage payments, and you tried to pay for this wedding using my venue. Jessica dropped her tissue. She stared at me, the reality of my power finally crushing the last remaining fragments of her delusion. The sister she mocked for working double shifts now owned the walls surrounding her. I kept my voice perfectly level. You sat in a restaurant last night and told Eleanor Foster I was a parasite. I said, looking directly at my sister. You told her I nearly bankrupted our mother. You took my silent sacrifice, the $60,000 I paid to keep a roof over your heads, and you weaponized it. You made sure the groom's family would look at me with pity and disgust. I was scared, Jessica choked out. Her voice sounded thin and weak. I just wanted Ryan to love me. I wanted his parents to think we belonged in their world. I am sorry, Calantha. I am so sorry. She stood up from the sofa. Her heavy dress dragged across the rug. She took a step toward me, clasping her hands together in a desperate plea. Please, Jessica, begged. She was no longer the arrogant golden child. She was a beggar pleading for a handout. We are sisters. We are blood. I will be better. I will include you in everything. We can start over today. Just tell Marcus to reinstate the waiver, please, Calantha. Put the zero balance back on the account. I just want to walk down the aisle. She offered hollow promises. She tried to negotiate a truce, using fake sisterhood as currency. She only cared about saving her wedding day. She only cared about her own image. I looked at her tear-stained face. I felt absolutely nothing. The bond of family had died a long time ago, killed by their own greed. I am not doing this for you, I told Jessica. I turned my head and looked at Ryan. He had followed me down the hallway and stood quietly in the open doorway watching the entire confrontation unfold. I came back because Ryan asked for the truth, I said. He deserves to know exactly what kind of family he is marrying into before he makes a legal commitment. I walked over to the desk. I looked at Marcus. The courtesy waiver remains permanently voided, I instructed my general manager. The same-day liability clause is in full effect. Do not release the kitchen staff. Do not start the music. I turned back to Ryan. The groom stood perfectly still, his jaw clenched tight. If you want to marry her, I told Ryan you have to pay the $85,000 invoice out of your own pocket today. There will be no family discounts. There will be no favors. The debt is real and someone has to settle it. The air in the room grew completely still. Brenda let out a quiet, pathetic whimper. Jessica spun around to face her, her hands shaking as she waited for his answer. I had drawn the ultimate boundary. I removed myself from their financial disaster. I placed the massive heavy burden of their lies squarely onto the shoulders of the man they had tried to manipulate. Ryan Foster had a choice to make. He had to decide if the weeping woman in the white dress was worth writing a massive check for, or if the toxic rot of her family was too deep to ever clean up. He had to make this choice right now, with 200 prominent guests waiting just outside the windows. Ryan Foster looked down at the weeping woman clutching the fabric of her heavy lace gown. Jessica stared up at him with wide and desperate eyes. She waited for him to pull out a checkbook. She waited for him to play the hero to absorb the $85,000 debt and to lead her out to the altar. He stood perfectly still. The silence in the manager's office felt suffocating. I am not paying a single cent for this venue, Ryan said. Jessica gasped, covering her mouth with her trembling hands. Ryan kept his voice steady, refusing to match her frantic energy. I am not refusing to pay because the cost is too high. I am refusing to pay because I will not finance a fraud. I will not fund an event built on the financial and emotional abuse of your own sister. He looked at Brenda. The matriarch sat frozen in the leather chair, her face buried in her hands. This relationship is over, Ryan stated. Jessica let out a guttural sob. She lunged forward, trying to grab his arm again, but Ryan took a swift step back. My business partner, Jonathan, moved effortlessly between them, acting as a physical barrier. Jonathan did not say a word. He just stood tall, his arms crossed, blocking Jessica from reaching the groom. Ryan turned around and walked out of the office. He marched down the wide hallway of the main house. I followed him. I kept my distance, walking a few paces behind, watching the man of principle dismantle the fake empire my mother built. Brenda and Jessica trailed behind us, weeping loudly, their cries echoing against the high ceilings. Ryan pushed the heavy glass doors open and stepped out onto the cliffside terrace. The afternoon sun beat down on the manicured lawn. 200 wealthy guests sat in their gold chairs, the soft murmur of their conversations filled the air. Waiters stood near the edge of the grass, holding silver trays of champagne they were instructed not to serve. Ryan walked straight toward the front of the seating area. He bypassed the white floral arch. He approached the audio equipment table where the hired disc jockey stood. "Cut the music," Ryan instructed the DJ. "Hand me microphone." The DJ blinked, surprised by the groom's cold demeanor. He slid a fader down on his soundboard. The background music faded into dead silence. He handed the wireless microphone to Ryan. Ryan turned to face the crowd. The guests stopped talking. 200 faces looked up, expecting a charming announcement about a slight delay. They expected a joke. They expected a smile. Ryan did not smile. "Good afternoon," Ryan said, his voice projecting clearly through the large speakers positioned around the lawn. "I want to thank all of you for traveling to Newport today. I know many of you flew across the country to celebrate this occasion. I am deeply sorry for the inconvenience, but there will be no wedding today." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Women covered their mouths. Men leaned forward in their chairs. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the ocean waves crashing against the rocks far below the cliff. Ryan stood tall, gripping the microphone. He did not look at Jessica, who was now standing near the terrace doors, weeping hysterically, while Brenda tried to hide her face from the crowd. "I am a man who values honesty and integrity above all else," Ryan continued. "My family built our lives on those principles. Today I discovered that the woman I intended to marry, along with her mother, has spent the last year constructing a web of toxic lies. The whispers started. Shocked murmurs spread from the front row to the back. I will not go into the ugly details of their private financial failures, Ryan stated, keeping his tone perfectly dignified. But I will clarify one crucial fact. You were all led to believe that this beautiful oceanfront estate was graciously secured by the bride's mother. That is a lie. Ryan pointed his hand toward the terrace, directing the attention of 200 guests straight at me. This venue, Ryan declared, is owned and operated by Calantha Young. She is the brilliant, hard-working sister of the bride. She secured this location at her own personal expense. She funded the very event we are sitting at right now. And her reward for that quiet generosity was being turned away at the front gate this morning by her own mother and sister. The shockwave hitting the crowd was palpable. Jaws dropped, heads turned, rapidly scanning the terrace until their eyes landed on me. I stood near the glass doors, wearing my modest charcoal dress, maintaining a calm and unbothered posture. Last night, Ryan added, his voice ringing with firm conviction. The bride looked my own mother in the eye and called Calantha a failure. She called her a parasite to hide her own family's financial ruin. I cannot in good conscience marry into a family that treats their own blood with such profound contempt. I ask that you please gather your belongings and return to your homes safely. Thank you. Ryan handed the microphone back to the stunned DJ. He walked away from the floral arch, stepping off the grass and heading straight toward the private parking lot. He did not look back. Pandemonium erupted on the lawn. Guests jumped out of their gold chairs. The polite restraint of high society vanished, instantly replaced by furious whispering and blatant pointing. In the front row, Eleanor and Thomas Foster stood up. Eleanor's face was flushed with shock and deep embarrassment. She looked at Jessica, who was sobbing into Brenda's shoulder. Eleanor shook her head in sheer disgust. True wealth did not tolerate public humiliation. The Foster family hated scandals, and Jessica had just dragged them into the center of a terrible one. Eleanor grabbed her husband's arm. They did not walk toward the parking lot. They walked directly toward the terrace. They walked toward me. I stood my ground as the prominent couple approached. Calantha, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with genuine emotion. She stopped a few feet away, looking at me with eyes full of profound remorse. I do not even know how to begin to apologize to you. Thomas Foster stood beside his wife, offering a solemn nod. We are deeply sorry, Calantha Thomas said. Eleanor reached out, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Last night in the restroom, Eleanor whispered her tone, carrying the weight of a mother's deep regret. I believed the awful things your sister said about you. I judged you. I thought you were a burden to your family, when in reality you were the one carrying them. I am so terribly sorry for being complicit in their cruelty. You did not deserve to be treated like that. I looked at Eleanor. I saw a decent woman who had been manipulated by professional liars. I did not hold any anger toward her. You were deceived, Eleanor, I replied, keeping my voice gentle but firm. My mother and sister have spent a decade perfecting their lies. You are not to blame. I am just glad Ryan discovered the truth before he signed a legally binding contract. Eleanor offered a sad and grateful smile. You are a remarkably strong young woman, she said. I wish we could have known the real you. They offered one final nod of respect, turned around, and walked toward their waiting town car. The lawn was emptying fast. Guests practically sprinted toward their vehicles, eager to leave the scene of the disaster and eager to start calling their friends to spread the ultimate high society gossip. That left Brenda and Jessica stranded near the entrance of the main house. Their fairy tale was dead. Their fake wealth was exposed. The $85,000 debt still hung over their heads, and they had no way to escape the crowd. In order to reach their car, Brenda and Jessica had to walk down the main brick pathway. They had to walk right through the departing guests. I stood on the top step of my luxury estate and watched the execution of their social standing. Brenda grabbed Jessica's hand. They lowered their heads and started walking. It was a gauntlet of pure humiliation. The wealthy socialites they had spent a year trying to impress now looked at them like they were diseased. As Brenda passed a group of country club wives, the women physically took a step back. I heard the sharp and cutting whispers carrying on the ocean breeze. "Can you believe the mother?" one woman muttered. "Utter trash," another replied loudly. "Faking an inheritance while her other daughter pays the bills? Disgusting." Jessica tripped over her heavy lace train. She stumbled on the bricks, crying out as she struggled to keep her balance. No one rushed to help her. No one offered a comforting hand. The guests just stared, judging every single tear. The social destruction they feared I would cause was brought down upon them entirely by their own actions. They tried to erase me to protect their image, and that exact decision burned their image to the ground. I stood on the stone steps, feeling the warm afternoon sun on my face. I watched them reach their mid-sized sedan. I watched Brenda fumble with her keys, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them on the gravel. I watched Jessica practically crawl into the passenger seat, burying her face in her hands to hide from the staring eyes of the valet drivers. They drove away, leaving a cloud of white dust in their wake. The estate grew quiet again. The catering staff began clearing the unused champagne glasses. Marcus walked out onto the terrace, holding his digital tablet, preparing to finalize the event cancellation and lock the gates. I took a deep breath. The weight of the last 11 years lifted off my shoulders, carried away by the ocean wind. The toxic chapter of my life was permanently closed. But the story was not quite over yet. The fallout from this day would ripple through the next 6 months, bringing a final and unexpected resolution that would solidify my victory and leave Brenda and Jessica facing the absolute reality of their choices. 6 months have passed since the string quartet packed up their instruments and fled the Newport estate. The coastal winds turned freezing, bringing a bitter winter to Rhode Island and freezing out the fragile lies my family spent a decade building. The fallout from that ruined Saturday afternoon was swift, total, and permanent. Ryan Foster drove away from the oceanfront manor and never looked back. He formally broke off the engagement the very next morning. He sent his corporate attorney to Brenda's house to retrieve the sapphire ring. Jessica tried to call him for weeks, leaving desperate voicemails, begging for a second chance. He changed his phone number. The Foster family severed all social ties with my mother. They did not issue public statements or engage in petty gossip. They simply erased Brenda and Jessica from their world, applying the exact same silent treatment my mother once weaponized against me. Without the protective shield of the Foster name, Jessica faced a harsh social execution. The wealthy circles of New England operate on strict codes of conduct. Word spread rapidly about the bride who tried to steal her own sister's estate while faking an inheritance. The country club wives shunned her. Jessica could not walk into a local coffee shop without feeling the burning stares of the local residents. The deep embarrassment became suffocating. She could not handle the reality of being an outcast in the town she used to rule. 2 months after the canceled wedding, Jessica packed her designer clothes into cardboard boxes. She fled Rhode Island. I heard through a distant cousin that she took a low-level marketing job in a different state, sitting in a gray cubicle under a manager who did not care about her fictional high society background. She is living a quiet, unremarkable life, forced to earn a paycheck just like the rest of the world. Brenda faced a much colder reality. The anonymous limited liability company stopped making secret mortgage payments on the childhood home. I ordered my attorney to dissolve the holding account. Brenda had zero income and zero credit. Within 90 days, the bank initiated formal foreclosure proceedings. The sheriff arrived on a Tuesday morning to post the eviction notice on the front door. Brenda had to sell her leased luxury vehicles just to afford a security deposit on a tiny, cramped apartment on the industrial outskirts of Providence. She traded her ocean views for a window overlooking a noisy highway. She lost her country club membership due to unpaid dues. The grand matriarch who once bragged about trust funds now clips coupons to buy groceries. She sits in a small room surrounded by the imported ceramic plates she bought with my stolen tuition money, possessing nothing but the heavy weight of her own regret. I did not answer their calls. I blocked their email addresses. I held the boundary I drew on the steps of the manor. True peace requires strict enforcement. While their fake empire crumbled into dust, my real empire expanded. The most surprising resolution did not come from my blood relatives. It came from Thomas and Eleanor Foster. 1 month after the wedding disaster, my corporate receptionist informed me that Thomas Foster was waiting in the lobby. He did not come to discuss family drama. He came as a businessman. Thomas sat across from my desk and asked to review the financial portfolio of Sterling Young Estates. He saw the profit margins. He saw the 80-hour work weeks I logged over the past decade. He recognized that I took failing historic properties and turned them into premier coastal destinations without carrying a single dollar of unnecessary debt. Thomas realized that the ruthless efficiency I used to protect my assets from my own mother was the exact trait he looked for in a corporate partner. The Foster family became silent equity investors in my company. Their significant capital injection allowed Jonathan and me to acquire 3 new historic properties along the eastern seaboard. We built a genuine partnership rooted in mutual respect and transparent ledgers. Tonight, I am standing inside the grand ballroom of our newest acquisition. The high ceilings feature restored crystal chandeliers, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. It is our official launch party. The space is filled with 200 guests, but this crowd is vastly different from the one sitting on the lawn 6 months ago. I look around the room and see Jonathan smiling near the bar. I see Thomas and Eleanor Foster chatting with local city council members. I see my dedicated staff, my mentors, and my genuine friends. There are no fake heiresses here. There are no toxic secrets hiding behind polite smiles. Every handshake is real. Every congratulation is earned. I wear a tailored black suit holding a glass of sparkling water. I feel a profound sense of calm. A guest asks me about the journey it took to build this portfolio. I offer a polite answer about hard work and good investments, but in my mind, my thoughts drift back to the small silver box I left on the welcome table on the morning of the ruined wedding. During the chaotic evacuation of the estate, the event coordinator grabbed the silver box and handed it to Brenda. I learned later that Brenda opened it while sitting in the empty manager's office right after Ryan walked out on Jessica forever. Brenda untied the silver ribbon. She lifted the lid, expecting to find a piece of cheap jewelry or a bitter handwritten letter. She found a single piece of faded paper. It was the original bank receipt from 11 years ago. The receipt showing the $14.12 balance. I kept that small piece of paper in my wallet for a decade. It was the physical proof of her original sin. It was the exact moment she stole my college fund to buy Jessica a semester in France. Leaving that receipt on the welcome table was my final, silent message. I wanted Brenda to know that I never forgot. I wanted her to realize that I built a multi-million-dollar company while carrying the exact proof of her theft in my pocket. She spent 10 years treating me like a fool, assuming I was too weak to survive without her. The receipt proved I knew the truth from the very beginning, and I chose to win anyway. They thought burying me in the dirt would keep me hidden. They did not realize I was a seed. Brenda and Jessica chose to live inside a fragile bubble of lies, prioritizing status over their own flesh and blood. They worshipped the illusion of wealth until it demanded a price they could not pay. They chose their lies, and those lies left them with nothing. I chose my reality. I chose the brutal, exhausting truth of hard work. I traded the comfort of a toxic family for the cold isolation of ambition. It was a steep price, but standing in this warm ballroom, surrounded by people who respect my mind and honor my boundaries, I know the transaction was worth it. I am no longer the invisible sister. I am no longer the ungrateful scapegoat. I am Calantha Young, the chief operating officer of my own life. And for the first time in 29 years, I am exactly where I belong. Thank you for joining me for this story. If you have ever been pushed into the shadows by the people who were supposed to protect you, remember that your silent hard work is building a fortress they will never be able to breach. Never let anyone rewrite your history. Say your truth clearly, set your boundaries like iron, and let the chips fall exactly where they belong. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below and share your own journey of overcoming family toxicity. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button for more stories about quiet resilience and ultimate justice. I will see you in the